Alrighty, good evening everyone. So we're going to use today another stock photograph of a competition. This is how the photo began. But with a little modification, I was able to change the photo to this. Now I won't go into detail over how it got here, just a quick overview. Let's take it back to the original. Over here are things called layer masks. So I grabbed them from the background, and the first thing I did was darken that background. Again, the photographer didn't have much choice in the lighting. He had to stick with what was there, which left, especially the guy on the left, very dark. So the first thing I did was take the exposure up just a bit, but it still left the guy on the left a little bit dark. So I changed the mask so that his head wasn't in it, because the head was already pretty bright from the previous thing. So by making the adjustment here, I can now make him look like he was lit in about the same way as the guy on the right. So now that we've got that done, the first thing we need to do is merge the layers down. Create a new layer, and we're going to do the update based off a painting on the color of what's already there. So we take the brush tool. Let's bring this in. And the first thing we need to do is get the brush to the size that we're going to use. Then we're going to sample the image. And over here, you'll see that the color changes. I change my opacity and my flow. And then I start to paint. Now you'll notice that I created a new layer, so I'm not changing the actual background. This allows me to turn this on and off and see if there's any kind of change, or if I need to work more on the item itself. Again, going for subtle, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm going to up the flow to 10%, I think. And change that opacity up just a little bit. And you got to pay attention to the way the colors change. Unfortunately, you just can't go through and go with the color as is, because you'll get to an area where the color changes and then it doesn't look natural anymore. And you see, we start to see a little bit of the darkening We're grabbing an area a little bit next to where we want to darken it that's a little bit darker, and then using that to paint on the image. And as you can see, the problem with this particular technique is the amount of time it takes to draw, because you're stopping every so often to get a new color. Now, this would be used more where there was an issue with doing it with dodge and burn. So let's take a quick look here and see what the difference would be. We'll back this photo out just a little bit so you can see that a change has been made. But let's pull this layer and go look at how it looks on dodge and burn. So you create a new layer that darkens it. And now it's quicker and easier to work on. Again, it comes down to, in part, preference, but it's very dependent upon how it looks in the image. We're trying to make it look natural, but at the same time not taking days and days with which to work on this. I have to switch over to my dodge and burn tool. And it goes a little quicker because you'll notice I do not have to keep sampling the colors. And I don't have to be as precise in the size of my brush. So if we take this out, you can see already the changes. Oh, there we go. Again, we're not trying to make it look unnatural. But there's another piece here I'd like to work on, and that's the tattoo. And here I do have to be a little bit more careful on where I'm going with it. You can see the pixelation because this is so large at this point. And it's a JPEG. And what this should do is give that just a little more pop and have it stand out just a bit more. You'll notice it's not coloring in the areas that look pixelated. That's the advantage of using dodge and burn, is I'm not painting on the image. I'm changing the color of the mask. Now, as you saw before, we had a mask. This is the same type of thing, although it's not a mask, it is a layer. But the same type of process that the mask has by making things black and white works here. Now if I turn everything off so you can see this, the layer, you can see what I've done, where my drawing is, how wide it is, etc. If, for example, there was an area in here that I needed to adjust, I could grab the color and just go over the area and take it back out of the image. Let's see how we're doing. We'll do a little more with the tattoos. And the reason I'm going to do more with the tattoos, being tattooed myself, I know there's a reason for my tattoos. The ones that I chose to have put on my body. And I like to honor that in the image itself, to make sure that they chose to have these tattoos. Let's make sure that they show up as nicely as they can, even if the lighting is terrible. Okay, whoops. I'm going to do what I did before with the other images, and that's go around and outline the face as well. Again, this just sets the image off a little bit more from the background. Things that are darkened, which is what I'm doing now, will look like they're further away from you. So that allows me to draw in the nose, for example, and it pulls the nose back a little so it looks more three-dimensional. In fact, I could do it with the entire body, but rather than keeping you guys here all night while I work on the image, we're just going to do some minor touch-ups like we've done before. Now this line in here looks a little too dark to me. So we're going to go in here, grab the brush tool, sample the gray, and just lighten that up a little bit. Again, I've got it set to the same settings as I had before, so anything that looks too dark to me, I can just go over and lighten just a bit. Now we've got the legs to do as well. And now you can see some of the arteries showing up. You can see some of the other material that's been done. So we could do the same thing on the other guy over here. What we'd be doing is exact same setup, and that's just going through and darkening those areas. But again, if you have a competition photo and you're only one half of that photo, there's no reason to go through and retouch the other person unless you want to show a very clean distinction between the two of you, an apples to apples type comparison, so that you don't think that you're just looking good in the picture because the person has not been retouched. If you feel you have an unfair advantage because your image was retouched and the other person's was not. But now that we've got this part done, I'm going to merge these back down again. And then I have this little guy down here that improves detail. Now the problem I've got with this image, because it's a JPEG, it'll improve the detail, but it'll improve it a little too much. And what I mean by that is if the image were enlarged, this would probably make it look poor, a poor quality. So, as we talked about masks before, we have our mask right here. I'm going to invert it, which changes it black, which means this effect is not on any part of the image. Now we go back and we start using brush tools. Here we have his tattoo, and I'm going to do everything at 100%, and we're going to keep the flow at about 25. Now what that will end up doing for me is let me touch this up so that the tattoos show better and they have more detail to them without the rest of it getting the same level of detail. Now one thing that would look pretty good with detail though, we zoom in here, you can pretty much do anything you want with facial hair because detail is fine. But again, see how pixelated this looks? If I go too much into detail with this and I was to make a large print out of this, and you guys know I love large prints, this would not come out looking good on a wall. So step this down here. I'll continue painting. Giving this a little bit more detail. There's not much to this for detail work. The other tattoo it would be more, to me, more important because this is pretty much a flat tattoo. There's not a lot of swirl and design to it. Don't have to be quite as accurate with this, but again, a subtle little change that in a lot of ways is lost on a small image, but on a wall print would definitely show up, and you can see the difference in the image. So I hope this was helpful. Next week, I believe I have a nice series of photos, and I'm going to go over the different things that would need to be changed on them, and good and bad about the poses themselves. So I hope you'd come back next week and see that critique.